The ruling All Progressives Congress has finally launched its campaign council and manifesto 4 weeks after the official start of the campaign season. The party is calling its 80-page manifesto an action plan for a better Nigeria, which identifies problem areas such as security and the economy. Now, Arise analyst Sam Amadi joins us to look at the manifesto of the party in connection to national realities. Thanks so much for joining us on Newsday. Welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Now, Dr. Amadi, I'd like your assessment of the APC's manifesto. Some analysts have complained that the manifesto contains some promises made in 2015 that were not delivered, like the mortgage system, decentralizing management of educational system, reviving the textile industry, and so on. So what's your own assessment of that manifesto? How do you expect Nigerians to react to it?
Well, thanks very much. First, I would say that it's not a big bang. I mean, after many weeks, really, of expectation, there was a first step initially, a manifesto that was disowned. This didn't come like great outing. First, it looks like a rehash of basically putting many things together without coherence. For me, there are three levels of assessment of a manifesto. First is coherence. Coherence relates to the diagnosis, the guiding policy you choose, and that means the strategic direction and the coherent set of action. That's what makes, that's a strategic guide. If you look at the manifesto, it starts with the forward with a rosy assessment and analysis of the Nigerian situation. Well, we are a lucky country, we are a great people, great prosperity, and then, you know, our job is probably to do a little bit of same. And so that misconception of where we are kind of fits through this document. So we wanted to see first, what's the diagnosis? So the diagnosis of Nigeria today is that this is a broken country. We are terrible. We are out almost. We are down and almost out. And so an economic plan starts with a first coherent, accurate and coherent assessment of the crisis and the problem. Now, how you now go and identify the issues, interventions you propose flows from diagnostics. Diagnostics, what is the problem? And so if you get to the first national security aspect of the manifesto, it puts in together a bit of everything. You know, it talks about increasing equipment, boosting equipment of military, more recruitment. It talks mentioned about doctrine and strategy. And I expected, if you look at that, I think that's page 7 or so, it talk about redefine military doctrine and practice. It raises hope that you're going to see some innovative sense in which the document kind of redesign the Nigerian military with respect to its operation in the security matter. But it ended up basically talking about anti-terrorism battalion, which is basically put together different groups, give them more arms, better manage them. But the failure of strategy in national security, which is where it starts from first. Why are we so full of security crisis? Why are we such an unsecured country? Today, we're hearing the British, the UK embassy giving us alerts about proposed or anticipated attack in Abuja, and not even our own security system reporting same. So from that analysis, you create a new innovative look at how you're going to reset the security infrastructure. But what we get from this document is basically put together a bit of things, upgrade the weapons, increase salaries, major, some recruitment. So really, it doesn't come out as an innovative approach to solving a problem. And again, maybe because the document tiptoes, pussyfoots around, not damning the government in power. I mean, admitting the failure we are in. And therefore, if you admit the failure, then you propose something radical. But if you want it to look like, well, we are doing fairly enough, then you are talking about improving what is being done. And that's the major failure. If you get the economic side of it, there are 3 models that are there in the world. The free model, FM, the free model of economic development, the simulated social market model, which is basically free market with some kind of tax and transfer and some redistribution for equity and justice. And then, of course, what we call the governed model, which is more like a strong public sector driving, providing incentives and choosing winners and pushing often an industrial policy. I think this document, the Tinubu's government will fall into the last category, the governed model. But the problem again is that some of the stipulations around the economy, if you look at issues around monetary policy, fiscal policy, if you look at industrialization, they don't seem to have that coherence. You see, if you want to shift from what we've been doing in the last since 1999, which is basically run an incoherent free market model, then you have to provide a coherent version of the Asian model where government, smart, intelligent government, uses the market to achieve strategic economic goals. We don't see that in clarity in this document. We see some good aspects. For example, the housing policy is a very good one here. Looking at doing something like the Americans do with the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, mortgage system, strengthening incentive for banks to lend for housing, and then putting incentives around taxations and order to force developers to focus on housing for the poor and controlling maybe rates of housing prices and tariffs, as the case might be. But the problem here is that this document sounds more like price control. They're bringing back the commodity boards, bringing back the currency. In fact, in the matter of currency, it's difficult to say what it wants to do. It talks about whether it's floating or fixed monetary policy. Which one are you using? Exchange rate? Is it fixed or floating or managed floating? But they talk about we're going to, it ends up with a language like we will optimize, we will improve, we will review based on. So it really doesn't sound very clear-cut. The article document, on other words, is clear-cut. You disagree with some of the pro-market approach to solving some of these problems, but you are sure exactly what interventions they're proposing. Here, you're not sure what interventions will be proposed in line with the policy. Now, if you look at the cost of governance, it says we're going to streamline the amount that government spends on itself. Now, if you look at the Orsa report, the issues around the structure of departments, the issue is not very clear and very emphatic on what government needs to do. Because if you're going to move into productivity, if you want new revenue, you're going to improve earning from oil and from the other source of income, export, and you're going to also reduce cost of governance that is escalating because of a weak and undisciplined structure of the federal bureaucracy. We're not seeing that in this document. So in other words, what you see here is clearly a document that is strong in narratives around discourse of economic issues and terms, but not clear-cut in terms of strategy. Economic management is a strategic work. It starts from diagnosis, you look for the crux of the matter, you look at levers you want to use, and then you focus on interventions, set of coherent actions that fits into the new direction that you want to push the economy and that addresses that diagnosis. For me, this is a document that is too full of words, but really doesn't give the sense of clarity, of a sense of change, and of something different. This is more of what is going on and a little bit of the governed model of economics in terms of price control, commodity boards, and maybe a much more stronger expenditure base. For example, we talk about budgeting now.
Dr. Amadi, I apologize. I must interrupt you just for the sake of time. I mean, it's 80 pages worth of a lot of information. It's a jambalaya mix or a fried rice mix. Sure. It's got a whole bunch of points that we could dissect. But just like you said, the clarity, the being concise and the implementable strategies, it seems a bit lacking on that part. And seeing as how it's a government that is, handing over from the government that is, it's the same government in transition. It's the same party. The trust that Nigerians might have once looking at this document might be a little bit less, or the confidence that Nigerians have that this document will actually be implemented might be a little less because of the the record of the APC government for the past 7 years. But I wanted to ask you more specifically on this tricky topic that we have been covering for years. It's even become more popular now. It's unfortunate for whichever party gets into government next February, because they will definitely have to deal with the removal of fuel subsidy. Constantly being talked about. It's an immediate issue that needed to be dealt with at least 5 years ago. Now, the government, or the document, says that they will hit the ground running, removing fuel subsidy. I'm wondering if there was enough due diligence on the part of the writers of this document in terms of research of the after effects and how to cushion that, seeing as how it has been done before, the removal of subsidy and the furor that amounted afterwards. Can you speak to us about your analysis on that particular subject of fuel subsidy that is so very important?
Absolutely. I think first, the three candidates seem to admit that fuel subsidy is a problem. The issue now is response. I think P2B says, look, first, this is a criminal cartel. And by the way, Buhari, before coming to power, says that the fuel subsidy budget or cost is inflated. Something is corruption. He didn't deal with that. Now, Obi says yes, but they said they're going to remove it and they're going to look for what will be the compensatory mechanism. Now, a Tinubu government, if it follows coherently from its premise, which is a social welfare-focused government, will not remove this fuel subsidy except they can find alternatives, or they are sure they are putting back that savings into a fund, an intervention that's going to drive social well-being. Don't forget that the Tinubu government says it's going to increase even social protection, social security spending. It wants to enforce control to spend for social costs. And therefore, removing fuel subsidy with all the attendant crisis might sound incoherent to a government that wants to improve on transfers. Again, they can also come up and say, look, the document does not speak clearly what are the consequences of this and what you need to do. Now, if you're going to remove the fuel subsidy, which is likely what should be done, and because of its inefficiency, 11 trillion we are trending toward by the end of the year. The question then is, first, how do you deal with the cost of governance? How do you create haircut for everybody? The poor are going to suffer because of the escalators, fuel and all that. But what about the people in the public sector? Look at the spends. So you have to come with a plan that says, look, we're going to remove this thing, but this is what we're going to do. And the idea of saying we're going to put it into education, all this might dissipate. The poor will not get the value concretely. So you must find a strategy that says this is, when you remove it, this is what you put in. And these are the people who are going to capture that benefit in numbers. So the poor will capture 80% of this intervention. For example, something like urban mass transit, where you are sure you have the vehicles, something like train. If you have a train service across the country, you can earmark salary scale, people have discount. So if a train from here to, let's say, Lokoja is 2 naira or 2,000, for the poor who are civil servants at this level, you must have database analysis. So you say these people will now pay 50 naira, 50 kobo, because they are being covered by the subsidy remover. So because we don't have the data set, because we don't have that strategy, and also we don't have those infrastructure we can discount for the poor, then removing fuel subsidy, we must admit that the poor will bear the brunt of it, even though they're not getting the benefit, the highest benefit of this fuel subsidy. About 40% of it goes to the rich, but the suffering that will come from this will be over like 50 to 60% to the poor. This plan does not speak about it. And I look at that Article's plan as well. It simply talks about, look, we need to remove this fuel subsidy. We need to reinvest it. Obi has not come out with any clear plan on this, but his own argument is that, look, first, we're going to prune these numbers. We don't consume this amount. That's a racket here. So defeat that racket, then maybe the numbers come down to a manageable number, that you will see that maybe the problem is not the poor consuming a subsidized product. The problem is actually corruption. People are inflating these numbers and taking money from the public that should have gone into spending for infrastructure. So I think we need to have a serious discussion around what will you do if you remove the fuel subsidy. Because anyhow, you see, there is incoherence in this economy. If you remove fuel subsidy, even though the poor don't get up to 20% of the subsidy, but when you remove it, the impact will be disproportionate on the poor and the working class. That's the problem of the economy. Except you have an economy where you can remove it and ensure that the benefit, so the poor gets disproportionate benefit from, instead of disproportionate loss that they will get when transporters, all kinds of persons will drive up cost of basic essentials, even including small, medium enterprises who depend on maybe fuel to power their own personal generator when they don't have service from the national grid. These are things you have to put into legible financial and social cost ledger. Then you can see through and then say, this is exactly the level of cost, the losses for each sector of the economy, and this is the mitigations we're going to give on real Naira and Kobo terms. That we're not seeing, and that's what is constraining this debate.
Oh, Arise News analyst, Dr. Sam Amadi, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.